for the first time, we have these Afghan artifacts in a museum, which is literally a jewel box of the Silk Road. For the first time, we've got the artifacts from Afghanistan in a setting which really just enhances everything about this exhibition. The permanent collections here at the Asian Art Museum are so wonderful, and I'd especially like to thank the chief curator here, Forrest McGill, who has been a great partner in bringing these things together. And as a small advertisement for him, I want to just show you a new book, which is out on Persian ceramics. Absolutely incredible. It is the perfect complement to the Afghanistan exhibition, and it's part of the permanent collections here at the Asian Art Museum. So at the end of the exhibition, you're directed to go see the rest of these collections, and it's my hope that you will see not only Afghanistan in new light, but you will see the collections here in the Asian Art Museum in a new light as well, so that every time you come and visit, you will see something new, something that resonates, something that's familiar, and something that's exotic, and you'll be able to bring home something from this experience here at this museum. Well, as a curator and as an archaeologist, I want to tell you a little bit about how exhibitions are created, because it's an amazing story. It really is something which is extraordinary, and we have this opportunity to tell you how an exhibition on the ancient cultures of Afghanistan came about. So let me start with a few slides, and the first one is, of course, a map. I work for National Geographic Society, so how else could I start a talk without a map, right? And so this is a political map. As you see, Afghanistan is right in the center of Asia, landlocked, surrounded by a number of countries that are in the news all the time. Afghanistan's in the news all the time. And, you know, it seems like an incredibly difficult place to work. And it's sort of like, why in the world would an archaeologist want to go and work in a place that's in the middle of Asia? Well, let me show you how archaeologists think about this area. This is my view of that same map, right? This is what I call my area of expertise, right? From the Black Sea to China, right? This is the Silk Road. This is an absolutely the most important trade network in the whole world, I believe. It is actually just a metaphor for trade. It's not, there aren't any paved roads between China and the West or from India to the north. These are just the routes that people would take trade items east and west and north and south. And for a scholar, for a student of this trade who's interested in this, one of the things you want to do is you want to look at and see what the engine of that trade is. So already some 20 years ago, I started to go to the very center of this area. I went to Afghanistan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan. As you see the area on the map, you see Balkan, Bukhara, and Merv. That is the area where we wanted to investigate how this Silk Road trade actually happened. And it's an area which is completely determined by the geography. Look at this. Afghanistan is a country with huge mountains. The Hindu Kush dominate Afghanistan. High, snowy mountains. You think, well, how could trade go through that? Well, here's a camel caravan going through the passes. It's those passes in Afghanistan that allowed trade to go east and west and north and south. Those mountains are ringed by deserts. And those deserts, you might say, well, they must be barriers to trade. Absolutely to the contrary. There were places in those deserts where cities were founded, oases that became stopping places for caravans. And here's a modern one, which I think looks just like what it must have looked like thousands and thousands of years ago. This is in northern Afghanistan, still a trading spot today. The archaeological remains in Afghanistan, in Central Asia, are really phenomenal. In Afghanistan itself, there are more than 1,500 known archaeological sites. Here's just one of them. In the desert, unexcavated. This is a medieval palace, just sitting out there. This is the way Afghanistan is. It is literally an archaeologist's paradise. Archaeologists have worked in Afghanistan and Central Asia for more than 70 years. Perhaps its most famous archaeological remains are the giant Buddhist statues, these huge ones that were found in Bamyan. Unfortunately, we know mostly about them from the time of the Taliban when they were destroyed. These You can see how big they are. You see at the bottom there's a series of small little French archaeologists. They're not so small, they're life-size. Those are giant Buddhas. So all of these artifacts from Afghanistan have been put in the Kabul Museum. They've been, all the best pieces have been deposited in the museum. Literally 70 years of research have created a museum which is the most unbelievable museum of Silk Road art in the world. 1978, however, I think the most amazing archaeological find in Afghanistan was made just on the eve of civil war in Afghanistan. Here you see an Afghan archaeologist beginning to uncover one of 6 intact nomadic tombs, absolutely bejeweled with more than 20,000 pieces of gold. And here's the archaeologist who found it, Viktor Sarinidi, actually a Russian, and his Turkmen colleague, with just a few of the golden items found from this find, found in 1978. They continued to excavate through 1979. In the middle of the winter, they were finding burial after burial, more than 2,000 years old. It was an amazing first picture of what the center of the Silk Road 2,000 years ago looked like. Well, they excavated this, and they had to inventory them very quickly. This is taking the collections down from northern Afghanistan to Kabul. Actually, Victor told me an interesting story. By 1979, things were so rough in Afghanistan that they had to hide the gold in paper bags, and they took it on a bus from northern Afghanistan down to Kabul. He hid it under his bed. Then they did this inventory. They found 21,000 individual pieces of gold from these 6 burials, 2,000-year-old burials. They didn't have a chance to study it. They didn't have a chance to exhibit it. They really didn't have any chance to do anything. They put it in boxes and hid it away. Viktor Sarinidi didn't see these treasures again until 1982, a couple of years later. He photographed it, and then it disappeared. He put it in boxes. He didn't know where it went. I met Viktor Sarinidi in 1988 in the deserts of Turkmenistan, far to the north of Afghanistan. And it was during an evening party. We were sitting around a campfire out in the desert. We were excavating an ancient site. And the question came up to Victor, what was the best find you ever made? And he told us about this incredible find of 6 nomadic tombs from Afghanistan. And I helped him come to National Geographic, and we wrote an article about this. It was a memorable article published on the pages of National Geographic in 1990 called The Golden Horde of Bactria. Bactria is the ancient name of northern Afghanistan. And he said in the last lines of that article, and I'll never forget it, he said, "Look well on these pictures because the artifacts are gone." Well, that stuck with me. If you can imagine, that was 1990.